This is the October 26th, 2020 meeting of the Town of Scituate Charter Review Committee. And I would like to call the meeting to order. Would somebody like to accept the agenda?
I move to accept the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
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 Technically, we're supposed to roll call, but I can see all six of us, so I'm going to make that executive decision. The agenda is approved and accepted. Before we look at the minutes from the last meeting, I sent you the last meeting minutes. I talked briefly with Lincoln earlier today, and I just want to note that unlike a lot of committees, and it's good to have a record, but they're usually kind of, general. They're not real, they don't say every single word everyone says. They give you the idea of what occurred. Our minutes are going to be critical when we come to the end of our process and need to make whatever recommendations, votes we're going to make. So I would ask that you spend a little time reviewing them, seeing if there's something in there that you think, oh, we better remember that to tell bylaws or whatever it is. So if you would like time to do that, we do not have to approve these minutes tonight. If you've had a chance to look at them, we can. What do you guys think?
Haven't looked at them.
You haven't looked at them? Okay.
I read them. They look fine to me.
I read through them, but
Okay. We can always go back. I don't know if any of you also got the Google Doc from Lorraine. Okay, I had trouble with it. I haven't pulled it up since I got it. I do now have it. But we should, I think it would be good to start getting in the habit of putting notes in that document, because we're going to forget what the hell we, covered. I'm trying to capture it in these minutes. And I think these video recordings are going to be helpful too. But rather than have to go back and watch them all, if we can memorialize them as we go, I think it'll be helpful. Okay, so shall we postpone? It's not on the minutes agenda to approve them anyway. So Marla, if you could approve the minutes for this meeting.
Yep.
And
I
the
will.
12th for the next meeting, that would be good.
So
Okay.
I just have one question about the minutes from last week. So in going through them, I saw, or a couple weeks ago, whenever it was, that there was a discussion about town meeting. Was anything determined from that? Is that still an open discussion? Just reading through, I thought it was worthwhile. I mean, I guess it might be a little bit outside the scope of this committee, but some good points were brought up.
You mean the discussion about whether it should be representative or not?
Yeah, and just the fact that, in a town of 19,000, 600 people show up and are making determinations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I didn't know if that, conversation was finished or if there was going to be further discussion on it, but, it's something that jumped out at me.
Yeah, no, it's an important one. What we decided was that it is outside our scope. So we could at the end of this say, wow, there's enough here that we should recommend a commission to look at this. But we're thinking it's going to come up as we go through this document about how it relates to that. So we want to just keep it in mind and make note of those sorts of things. We can't, as a committee, recommend changing the form of governance, but we can recommend that the town go to the commission level, which would be able to have that authority. But yeah, that was I think in the conversation, we kind of figured like there's all these interweaving things. You got to talk about governance to make sure that our document makes sense the way it is right now. But then there's things in bylaws that somebody else is going to look at, but we should note those as, that's what I mean about the agenda. I mean, the minutes is to note those document them as much as we can so that we don't forget.
Yeah.
And that it can be useful to whatever the next stage is of this review. Does that make sense?
I felt the same way about the term limits discussion. I felt like it's weaved into other things, same exact, pathway, but just that it warrants more discussion, and it's a tricky, tricky piece of all this, and how it is weaved into the entire, discussion at large too. So.
And I
Yeah,
thought
so we have to figure out a way to make sure that we keep sort of that running list. I did highlight in the minutes that the committee agreed that we should abolish the 2 open seats and go for 2 top vote getters, because we
Right.
did have a consensus on that.
Yeah,
And it's, I put it in highlighting because that was something we
Yeah.
kind of like discussed, agreed
Yes.
on. So at the end of this whole process, we can go back and easily say, okay, let's put this on our final list of things. We'll have to ask council whether or not we can actually affect something like that. But at least look, we made a decision on something.
yeah.
Well, could it be just a recommendation for the next committee? Would it be against our purpose to make recommendations for another group to look
I
at?
don't think so, not at all. What do you guys think? And they don't
Yeah,
have to
further
listen to us.
exploration? No, absolutely. I think that's within our purview, right?
That's what
Yeah, a recommendation is simply that we've had an informed conversation about it in the context of looking at our charter, and
Yeah, so I guess my question is, why would you need to go to council on that?
that's true. I mean, well, I guess because then when we advise the Board of Selectmen, we can say, council says we can't do this without going to committee or a commission or not. You know, it's an obvious question to ask.
Yeah, okay, good, thank you.
I think, I mean, I think it'd be helpful to the board because the board could do it. The board could say, okay, send these all off to council and see if we can just do these things or not. But
Mhm.
I don't see why we should, I think we should just do it.
Yeah.
So,
Karen, can we have just a quick reminder? You probably know, I'm sure somebody here probably knows the answer to this. I think if we were to go to representative town meeting, it would either be done by a commission, or I know there's a section of state law that the town can accept, I guess by a ballot vote, to accept just here, you're going to do representative town meeting under this, under this rubric as laid out in state law. I think those are the 2 options, correct? Or maybe we don't know. I don't know.
yeah, I mean, I think it's spelled out. I forget what I looked it up at one point. It is spelled out what you can do, but
Yeah.
I believe whatever it is, you still need to get legislative approval.
Gotcha. Okay.
In fact, I'm pretty certain that's the case. But you don't get to just make up, oh, we're gonna have anybody named Sally be on that. You can't do that. You have to pick one of the ones that's in the statute, but it
It's in
still has
the-
to get approved.
Yeah, like it's like this plan or that plan or this plan or something.
Exactly. Yeah, those are spelled out in Mass General Law.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. When last we left charter review, we were on section 3.3, discussing the moderator, which is very timely because I went to the moderator's meeting today to discuss town meeting. So I actually brought up a couple of the things that we've alluded to already to get his 2 cents on it, which is I'll interject as appropriate. So if we want to dive in, we're at section 3.3, moderator term of office, powers and duties. And A is term of office. And as written in the charter, it is for a term of 1 year. We did start to talk about that a little bit. Do you want to discuss any more of this? We're not sure we can do anything about this because it's an election, but are there pros and cons to 1 year? Or is everybody cool with it and we can move on?
Was there a rational, has it always been 1 year? Was it changed at some point? Why is it 1 year?
I don't know that.
Because everything else is like 3 years, and I'm just curious. Why is that? This is the one office that's only 1 year and it's an elected position. I don't get that.
That may be in the Mass General laws for the reason that, so for the reason that if somebody really messes up at town meeting, you have the opportunity.
Yeah, but I guess
If it's in mass law, it should be in the other charters.
Yeah.
I don't remember what.
Oh,
normal
yeah.
is.
Oh, good thinking. Good thinking.
but I would think
I'll
if they're
check.
really messed up, there would be a way to remove somebody.
Yeah, no, because I'm looking at Long Meadow, it's 3 years.
And I would think there
Oh,
would
is
be a
it?
way to
Oh,
remove
okay.
somebody if they're really incompetent.
Yeah. Well, and we have the recall. We're going to get to that.
Yeah, Yeah, so I think
We
you'd be
recall,
subject to a
recall on
recall, yeah.
moderator though?
Yeah, but that's a really big deal to recall somebody.
Yeah.
But if they truly mess it up, it totally shank it, right? I don't,
But I don't, do we have recall on anything, on any elected official in the charter? I don't
Believe
I
know.
don't answer that.
Where is that?
That is
Recall petitions is at
710.
710,
What is it again? Sorry.
Yep.
Say the section again.
710.
710.
Who can
Okay.
be recalled? Any holder of an elective office as defined in section 3(1)(a) may be
Okay.
recalled therefrom by the voters as herein provided.
Yep. Okay.
I turned right to it amazingly.
So Long Meadow has 3 years for their moderator.
I'm looking at Norwell, see if I can.
I know one thing that the previous moderator was kind of annoyed at, which I can understand, but it's not a big deal, is that he had to get, I believe, how many signatures do you have to get? 100?
Yeah,
Yeah.
every year.
And
100.
you know, and he said to
That
me
is a
once
lot.
in passing, he wasn't like super complaining about it, but he's like, yeah, it's kind of annoying that I have to get at least 100 certified signatures every year.
Yeah. Norwell is 1 year.
And they had, or I don't know if Roger Hughes is still their moderator, but he was moderator for decades there.
Hmm.
Well, I don't know. I mean, what do you guys think? I mean, I think in theory, I guess.
I mean,
I don't
technically,
know- I
there's
don't know why-
procedures for removal. If somebody makes a mistake, a grave mistake, there's procedures that the select board would follow to remove a person. So whether it's 1 year or 3, if they make a mistake, it's still during their term
How much
and they'd be
turnover?
removed regardless of whether they were there for 1 year or 2
Yeah,
or
in the
3.
practical world, you know, you go out and try to recruit your replacement. People
Right.
aren't banging down the doors to do this job.
True.
How much turnover is there in the position, right? Well, how many
Yeah.
moderators have been the last 10 years?
Little, we just had a turnover last year, and
Yeah.
Richard was there how many years? Long time.
And
Oh,
before that, it was Peter Levitt for years and years and years.
Yeah.
So there doesn't, I mean, so 1 year, 3 years, I mean, there's not much turnover to begin with.
No,
Right.
I don't think it
Is
makes.
there a negative to moving to 3 years? What would be the negative? What would be the regret for us making that decision?
To Lincoln's point, it'd be harder to replace.
Right.
Yeah, that's all. It makes it harder if somebody really messes up, but you know.
Well, what happens if you get somebody up there and he or she really doesn't do a good job on the first year and says, whoa, I don't want to do this anymore.
Right.
They're stuck for 2 more years.
No, they can resign, can't they, at any time?
Yes.
They're not indentured.
I know, but that's, that looks bad.
Oh, but we give it thought.
No, I was going to say, Karen, what do you think? What happens to those of us that do those things and then have
Yeah, I mean, no, I think in
Just
a practice, it usually has more to do with you change your job or,
Yeah.
something comes up. that you
right
just can't fulfill.
relocation and yeah.
I would think, given that the long history in our town is that somebody comes in and they stay for quite a while. And then, I think with Richard, I think he was ready to go years ago, but, he was committed to doing the job well and wasn't going to step away till we talked somebody else into to doing it. So it really, I don't remember ever having a contested race. So I don't think it's one of those rules where, people aren't doing it because they don't want to run against an incumbent. It's not that kind of rule.
Maybe
I
we
have no
should
problem
let it alone.
recommending a longer term because it is ridiculous that they have to keep going. But
Yeah. It's a lot to have to get 100
did you find
signatures every
Norwell?
year.
What did you say? Norwell's one too?
Norwell's 1 year.
And does Swampscott have a moderator?
They do, but remember, it's representative and they're elected at each, and they
Oh.
get together, and then they elect the moderator at each annual
At each
meeting.
time. Okay.
Oh.
So so like we're having some special meeting, well, there would be an election for a moderator at that special meeting if you're doing representative government.
Okay.
By the way, I saw the notice for special meeting, but what's it about?
What special meeting? What?
Our town is apparently having a special meeting in what?
Oh,
3 weeks.
no, it's just always called a special town. We have our
It's
annual.
like, oh gosh, I have no idea what's going
Yeah,
on.
no, and the special town meeting is just because it's not the annual. We always have 2 town meetings. And it's just normal town business. The warrant will be posted shortly. A lot of it is stuff that we delayed from annual town because we wanted to push as much out as possible.
All right, are there, and so a notice and warrant, do those have to be, are there rules or,
Yes,
guide? Okay, there are, okay.
yeah.
So
So
Karen-
so the Board of Selectmen approved the warrant last Tuesday, I believe.
Okay,
And so that'll start the process. So you got advisories already started reviewing the articles.
Yeah, so when we finished, actually, we had to finish because our write-ups are due tomorrow.
Are you kidding? Oh, well, there you go.
So that's part of that whole discussion we had a little bit.
Right?
yeah, yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a short timeline.
Yeah, I mean, especially from, well, whatever, we'll come back to it.
Yeah, so
Whatever.
Where's it going to be held?
right now, the plan is to have it indoors at the gym, have both the gyms, the big gym and the little gym. Yeah, it's a complete toss of the coin whether, how it's gonna work. In that scenario, we can have I think they said 340 people. There's really nothing on the warrant that is gonna bring flocks of people. Most of it is pretty routine stuff that needs to get done. It's stuff like rescinding bills that weren't paid and.
Yeah, we don't need to spend a whole bunch of time on it.
Yeah, so we felt like we had everybody meeting today, the clerk and the moderator and all of the custodians and the facilities people. And it was like, there were more things that could go wrong trying to have it outside on November 16th or moving it to that Saturday than an overflow problem, which is the biggest problem inside. So we're gonna see what happens. Anyway, but that's a good point about just sort of what are the processes for a special town meeting. We already did that, right?
Yeah, I thought we did. I just wasn't.
Yeah, we did the town meeting. And I think it does say under there that the town Board of Selectmen have the authority to call any meeting. Isn't that right?
Right.
Yeah. So in practice, we typically have 2 a year anyway, because there's always something that needs to get decided.
No worries.
Okay, where were we? So back to the moderator. Do we want to recommend a different time term?
I don't suppose you asked Jim the other day.
Pardon me?
I don't suppose we know how Jim feels about it.
No, I mean, should we ask him?
Yes. I would
Okay.
hate to make a recommendation that he didn't agree with.
Okay. Yeah, the poor guy. Hey, you signed up for a year. Guess what?
Yeah, right.
You're running
You
for
got
a
2
5-year term.
Right.
Okay. All right. So we will ask the current moderator his opinion, but that none of us feel real strongly that it needs to be 1 year. Okay. Powers and B is powers and duties. Moderator shall possess the powers that are contained herein. Did anyone have any comments about that?
I
Okay,
think
just
that
thought
we
it's
were
right.
chatting before about the power of the moderator.
Yep.
That the moderator appoints both the advisory board and the capital planning committee. And we just were having a discussion about that. That's a lot of power for one person.
And there should be more transparency
Yes,
involved in the process.
correct.
Okay.
Because there was nothing in the bylaws, if I recall, that had any, I just says, yeah, he gets to do it, and that's that. Or she.
Thank you. So more transparency for moderator appointments. And I'm gonna just write it out. How is this accomplished?
It's the only committee, if I'm correct, that is not go before the Board of Select the Select Board.
Those are all,
Why?
my understanding was balance of power. So,
I can speak to I don't know, the capital planning committee is a little bit, I'm not sure what the reasoning would be. I know for the advisory committee, the reasoning, whether it makes sense or not, the reasoning is that the moderator sort of, he or she moderates town meeting, and that the advisory committee is basically a committee of town meeting, the legislative branch, not the executive branch represented by the selectmen. Now, whether or not that makes sense to you is another thing, but I'm pretty sure that's the reasoning.
Do you feel the same way about capital?
Yeah, capital doesn't make as much sense to me personally. I mean, a lot of towns don't even have a capital planning committee, right? But but I don't. Yeah, I think because it seems to me like a capital planning committee is more of an executive function. I mean, certainly the legislative has an input on it, but it's a little bit more of an executive function for planning.
so those are both defined in appointments of the moderator in our bylaws, both those committees.
Right.
Right.
So the punt is, that's for bylaw review committee to figure out.
Right.
I don't know.
I think that's what we discussed last time, was that yes, we'd recommend the bylaws, create more transparency in that part, the legislative part of the piece.
Yep. All right. Let me write note of that. Okay. Yeah. I thought that my understanding was that the capital was because somewhere along the line, it was felt that there should be sort of a checks and balances on reviewing capital expenditures. And
I'm afraid the capital planning committee is in our purview, and that it lays out a bunch of it in the charter. But we're not there yet, but it's in 6.6.
Yeah.
it is in the charter as well.
Yep.
It is.
I wonder if it's written like Norwell's. So Norwell's is the capital budget committee consisting of 7 members appointed for 3-year overlapping terms. 1 member shall be appointed from the planning board and 1 member shall be appointed from the advisory board.
Okay. Yeah. So why don't we wait? Because now that I've gotten to 6.6 at the top of my page, it says discuss capital responsibility.
Yeah.
So we postpone that and talk about, because we're on elected officials right now. Should we do that?
Yep.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. So now we've gotten through 3.3B. The only thing I would add is I would reference that by this charter, and then I don't know, just because I think it's cleaner, is say in section 2.2 is where we talk about what their roles are, the moderator's powers are. It's just a housekeeping thing. I'll put it in the Google Doc. You guys can see. Okay, so that brings us all the way up to 3.4. And that's school committee. Nicole, would you like to lead this discussion?
Sure. Let me flip to it.
The first is composition and term of office, which has the same, we did talk a little bit about this, position versus.
Right. I think that as with the select board, I'm going to speak for all 5 of us, that we kind of agree with the process of doing it by, because the way that our terms go too is the exact same as yours. So we would agree to moving to a top 2 vote getters system versus, so that happens twice for us. So we do 2, 2, and 1.
Yep.
But we agree with that, I think, as having gone through the process, that it seems like a fairer way to do it. The top vote getters win. So
Okay.
I don't know. It's very similar to select board where, same process, we need 100 signatures and all the same process and procedures.
Can I interject for just 1 second? Just the 100 signatures thing.
Yeah,
State law, Karen, I don't know. I think
I
it's,
think it is because those come from the state.
I think that's a state thing, yeah.
I
Yeah,
think it is too. I'll try and find it.
I think it is.
Oh, good.
too.
Lincoln will
Um,
research signatures. But I think it is the state thing, because the whole reduction because of COVID, you had to go through the legislature.
Right.
I thought it's
Actually,
interesting.
ours is already written that way now that I'm reading it again. The candidate receiving the highest number of votes for each position shall be declared, for each position. So you want to reword that.
Um,
So as it's written, you're running for the seat versus,
You're running for the position, right?
yeah,
So in theory, if somebody's in position 1 and, first
Exactly.
person got 1,000 votes and the second person got 999 and
Yep.
Position 2 only
Right.
got 500, that,
exactly.
I
I don't think it
actually
comes
thought that was
into,
interesting. Sorry?
yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem to be hotly contested, but it could happen, certainly, that we could find ourselves in that kind of a position. If 2 people ran for the same seat and then it was a year where 2 seats were up, the person who got the second highest most votes could end up not getting a seat.
Yep, it does happen. All right, I got all my papers messed up.
What else?
Does anyone else have any comments about school committee, that section? I've completely lost all my papers now. 3.4, okay. Then powers and duties, this B under that.
My only comment is that, the last phrasing about how it shall have such additional powers and duties as may be authorized by the charter or by law. And I guess that's just you'd have to keep that in mind as we go through the rest of the charter. If school committee comes up as having certain duties, that we might want to reflect on that then, and it might tie back into that sentence. But as of right now, I mean, I don't know what you all think, but
Yeah, I had written.
I don't want any more duties.
Well, I know, but I was thinking the same thing. It's like, do you need to add appointing powers that are defined in Mass General Law or add policy
Right.
role? And then I put MGL question mark because I didn't
Yeah.
know if it was in MGL at all. I mean, this
Right.
covers it, but it doesn't define it very well.
Exactly.
Does
That's what I was thinking too.
the state laws, I assume the state law specifically says that a school committee appoints the superintendent, but I don't know where
Yes.
state law, but I assume it
That's
does.
in the MGL.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's pretty well laid out in there, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah, theirs is very, very clear. I
That
think.
we're very familiar with. And yes, it
On
is
page 5.
clearly stated and easily followed.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, do we need to be that explicit in the charter because it refers to it? It says general laws of Mass.
Right. Which then you get into the weeds of.
Exactly. I'm okay with it as is. Anyone else feel like powers and duties need to?
Now,
at
the
this
only
point?
question I have is, did Norwell or Swampscott or the other communities expand on anything
Right.
other than that? Because I'm happy with this, but I didn't know if anybody else another town had a better idea.
Andy, did you?
I don't even think Swampscott doesn't even reference the school committee.
Yeah, I don't think Long Meadow does. And it really only talks about the budget of the school committee, interestingly.
Yeah. Looking through Norwell, it doesn't mention it in this particular. No, it doesn't at all, actually, unless it's in a previous section that I missed.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
I would say
interesting that-
Swampscott's silent on it.
Yeah.
Nicole, do you have some similar thing in the state law having to do with that? I know it's a longer discussion later, but about you have to have the full board, or in this case, committee there to remove or approve of a new superintendent or.
Technically, it's a 3-2 vote,
Right.
but it's more of that political good faith. I mean, you want to have consensus around a big decision like that and put faith in your new leader. So it's sort of the guidance on that is, it'd be really great if, 4-1 would be like, okay, if it's 4-1 and there, that's okay. But
Yeah.
it's really 3-2.
Yeah. No, just as far as so for example, 3 members of the Board of Selectmen, quorum being there, can't fire the town administrator. You know what I mean? In other words, the whole board.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, do we need
You know what I'm saying?
to fire someone?
Or,
fire a
or
superintendent?
to add them, I guess. Either or, but just curious.
I don't know. I can find that
Let's
out,
write a
though.
note. School committee, are superintendent removals, what are the requirements for superintendent removals?
It's not a big deal. It's just, if it doesn't matter.
No, you know what, we talked about it with the town administrator. It's an important question.
Mhm.
What are requirements for removal?
I'm not sure if we had to have 5 votes on that.
Or hiring, yeah, or hiring.
Hiring, I'm sure that we did not need 5.
Doesn't require. Okay.
But firing, I can't remember. I'm sure it was discussed previously.
Well, we'll see. Is this in Mass General Law or
Right.
whatever? Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Huh. Okay. Any more on school committee powers and duties? Okay. All the way up to 3.5, which is planning board. First is composition, terms and powers. So let me just so one thing that's interesting, so I didn't have any comments about it, but what something I learned just because it just happened is the way it's written, they have, so the alternate position on the planning board is actually an elected position. However, it's this one position that, should it become vacant, which is what happened here, somebody resigned from the planning board, the alternate was elected to the full board. The board can then in a joint, in this, I think this is Mass General Law, the board and the Board of Selects, the planning board and the Board of Selectmen can jointly appoint an alternate until the next election. It's just one of those weird little quirks. And I just bring it to your attention because I didn't realize that until we actually had that. Otherwise, they are an elected board like the others and have the same. Now, do they have a position? Yeah, they have a position.
They have a position too. So should we be consistent and say top 2 vote getters?
I think we're pretty in concert. Michael, are you on concert with that's just not a good plan in general?
Yeah, I don't think it makes sense to include the position, not in a town of this size. It sets it up for interesting possible outcomes.
Okay. Any other comments on composition or term of office?
I never really understood the alternate thing. How often does that happen? I don't know. In other words, is it really that frequent that the alternate needs to
Step in.
step in? I don't know. I just never understood.
I think it has to do with this, and I'm not sure if zoning board has it as well. I think they do. Is that things that come before the planning board and the zoning board of appeals, you usually have a long arc of understanding. Like
Right.
things come in and it takes a while to really get your feet under you. So because you can only do what the laws, allows you to do. I think the logic on this is if you're an alternate, you're there for all those conversations, but you don't have a vote. So it's sort of like training wheels.
Right.
And it also attracts people who might be really interested but intimidated to have that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially those two committees, it really has been useful. Council on Aging has added, I have to check if we have to do that at town meeting. They wanted alternates for a different reason. Is they had a lot of people interested and they wanted them to come up to speed with their clientele basically before they were making decisions on behalf of them. So I think this one has more to do with you need to know a lot of stuff to be effective. So do you have an objection to it, Mr. Heineman?
I don't. Thank you for the explanation. I never understood it.
It does, actually. That one works.
Yeah, there seems to be a reason.
If Becky were here, we could ask her. Okay, then the next is the powers and duties of the planning board, which is the same kind of language as the school committee. Any comments or questions there? All right, seeing it. Look, we're rolling along. 3.6 is library trustees, near and dear to my heart. The start of my public career. Composition. This one always confuses me because I think it's the only one that has even number of members. And so that was my question. So why is it 6? It makes no sense to me.
Was that ever a problem when you were there?
No, it's never been a practical problem. I mean, there are sometimes hotly contested things in the library, but I mean, normally you have an odd number because you don't want to have a split vote.
Yeah.
So I don't know why that is. Or does there need to be a mechanism for split votes? In the event of a split vote, the library director makes the deciding vote. Something. I don't know. I just bring it up because it's unusual for a committee. Thoughts? Of course, if we change it, it'll totally screw up everything. No one wants to spend time thinking about the library trustees' composition?
Well, I mean, the question is, all right, their powers and duties, general charge of the care and management of town libraries. What does that mean? That's very broad and very general.
So I would agree that every committee should have an odd number, just
I do too.
just because.
I think,
But how often is there a split vote?
Yeah, but
That was what I asked.
Why create the potential?
Somebody put it in there at some point for some reason.
yeah.
I know. Maybe because then it's 2, 2, and 2. You don't have to have that one weird outlier.
I think the bigger issue with I think it's a conversation, the bigger issue with what's in the charter is the management of town libraries. Like, I think that seems to me, I think it's just about the only thing in the charter that doesn't say the town administrator or the school committee, the schools, obviously.
Yeah.
But with the exception of the schools, everything else says the town administrator has, the management authority basically, right? So.
Well, Jesse does have to go before the town administrator to get things approved.
Yeah.
Well, that has actually come up, which is an interesting thing. So people will give it's usually memorial donations, but they'll give a donation to the library in honor or memory of a person. And some of those will be, I'm going to give money for Aunt Susie, and I want it to be used for the library collection of Irish heritage books. Or I want it to be, or more importantly, I want it to be used for programming at the library. So then that goes into a separate little fund that is the Susie Memorial Fund. But in past practice, the town administrator has declined to use those funds against a vote of the trustees for whatever purpose. So the trustees will say, okay, Aunt Susie Memorial Fund says we can use it for this purpose. We vote to use some of that money for this purpose, and the town administrator has overwritten that request,
Wow.
which as a former library trustee, I have a big problem for, because as it says, they have the general charge of care and management of the library. It doesn't talk about the funds. So that's a gray area where a town administrator can say, I'm in charge of finances.
Well,
Whereas,
then, but theoretically, couldn't the board then sue the town administrator?
yes.
Hmm.
But
So-
that,
Or the donor.
in a genteel town like ours, that doesn't really occur.
I understand, but the threat of a lawsuit usually gets somebody's attention.
Yeah.
So Karen, not to get too far into the weeds, but each trust like that should, or probably should, depending on its age, specify who the trustees are. And any town administrator, because I know this from Hanover, because we have the same situation. And so if it says who the trustees are, that is to say, like, if there's a library trust and it says the board of library trustees are the trustees, the town manager can't override that. I mean,
That's interesting. Okay, so
but I mean, it's
sidebar, check.
yeah, some town administrator might tell you differently, but I don't think so. But the other thing is, though, is if it doesn't say, and this is very clear because I had to get deep into it with a weird little it's if it doesn't say, if the trust itself doesn't say who the trustees are, then there's supposed to be a board of trust fund commissioners, and they are the ones who decide how all trusts who don't have a designated board of trustees, how those funds are used. So I would say that certainly the town administrator or town manager could advise, but they can't direct. I think that's pretty clear.
So you mentioned trust fund commissioners?
Yeah, which I don't think we have in Scituate. It's a whole other rabbit hole, but that's set up in state law, basically. That's basically says, if you have trusts, which I'm sure the town of Scituate does,
Yeah.
you have trusts that don't specify who the trustees are of it, that you're supposed to have a board of trust fund commissioners who determine how these trusts are used.
So it doesn't fall to the library board of trustees to become that commission?
Well, it would depend on
Oh
what
my-
the trust says. If that trust says the board of library trustees are the trustees, then you're good. If it doesn't, then you probably have to say that this board of trust fund commissioners makes the decision.
Okay, so that's definitely a follow-up thing that we need to check, because as noted before, if it's not in our charter, we default to Mass General Law. So I'm sure Nancy Holt knows this cold, so, yeah. So
It's a whole,
But also, if there was a trust that was created, there's some sort of documentation around it.
correct.
right.
So-
So most of them do, most of the trust, right? Most of the trust will say, and I suspect that this library trust says that it's determined by the board of trustees, although it may not, right? Who knows?
I don't, there's actually quite a lot of them.
Yeah.
So some of them, I think, say the library director has the authority.
So there you go, right?
Yeah.
So it would seem to me that some people just make donations and say, in memory of my great aunt Susie, I
Mhm.
want, here's money to go for this purpose, without really creating a trust, just giving money to the
Yes.
library.
Yeah, that is the more often. It's just a letter, that comes in with a check. The more substantial ones will have more documentation, obviously. A lot of times it's unrestricted. It goes and there's a gift fund at the library that is, in theory, the library director's discretion, but in practice isn't. But that's a whole different conversation. On this, so let's just, before we go too far down the road, so We just noted, we wondered if it should be odd. We're not going to make a decision whether or not there should be an odd number of trustees, but it's just odd. And then on powers and duties, Andy, you think it's not specific, there's not enough specificity?
Yeah, it's squishy. It's like a jellyfish.
It is. I'm going to write that down. Don't be jellyfishy.
Well, as a former, well, Marla, you were a library trustee as well, right?
Well, I mean, it's more about
I'm on the foundation.
The foundation, that's right. No, I'm just wondering, as far as the management piece, I'd definitely love to hear how people, who particularly, who are particularly knowledgeable about the library's operations feel about the management. I think all things being equal, in principle, how come the town administrator has management authority over basically every other area of town government except the schools, but not the library?
Oh, but he does. Because basically the running of the library has all to do with money and budget,
Right.
and he controls the finances. So the library director is always going, every budget session is putting together her budget for the number of employees, the number of part-time, the number of full-time, the number of monies there are for book requests and other things. So he really does have total control.
So that's so to that point, if that's the reality, then maybe the charter should reflect that. and take
Right.
out-
So maybe it's the wording.
You know what I mean? So
Is that the way it should
Yeah.
be?
Right.
So maybe it should or shouldn't be that way, but if that is in fact the way that it operates now, then the charter should reflect that.
Yeah.
Right? And right now it doesn't reflect what's happening, right?
Yeah, Lincoln, that's my point. Is that, right, if they don't have any control over the money, right, and they don't really have any, it's really, in name only.
Well, they don't have any control over the operational money, operational funds. And I think we need to
All right, then that's
research if they have who has the authority over the trust funds.
Right.
Right, yeah, that's a
Funds.
distinction. Yeah, that potentially
Yeah.
needs to be made.
I don't necessarily can think of them as trust funds because there's not a trust set up in most cases. Most of the money is gifted money.
All right, gift funds
Or, yeah.
That are
trust funds or
outside of-
gift accounts,
that are outside the budget,
Yes.
outside of the
Yes,
operating.
non-budget items,
right.
That's
But
a
where
very-
are those
non-budget sources
deposited?
of revenue. Because I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, does the town budget have a line for gifts to the library?
Nope.
There you go.
Right. They're put in special accounts and they're all accounted for in special accounts.
They're
They don't
segregated.
appear on a balance sheet and they do appear on the balance sheet for the town because they are,
But they're segregated from the
but
town.
they are segregated, just like, and I think rec may have some of those too. There are
So does
some, it happens in different departments, that
Does the-
somebody will say, Aunt Susie was our sailing instructor and we're gonna give money to the rec department. And they have their own gift account that they can tap into. But that's an interesting thing.
Does the Board of Selectmen approve those gifts or just the library trustees?
The Board of Selectmen does not, in the case, especially in the case of the library.
Right.
Is this true? Let me think about it.
Well, they're both elected officials, so they would.
Right, so we don't step on their toes, but the gray area is things like somebody gave donation for an outdoor garden area, basically, at the library. Those funds are being augmented, it's very complicated, being augmented by CPC. The library trustees approved the plan that they liked it for the building. They thought it was good for the building. The Board of Selectmen had to approve the use of town property for the use. And then CPC was going to give approval for the additional funds needed. That's how that
To
went
make it
down.
more complicated, it was not given to the library, it was given to the Scituate Library Foundation.
Oh, yeah, just to make it even more fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Library Foundation made the application to CPC. But none of that would have happened without the blessing of the trustees because they're the stewards of that facility. But they don't control the property because it's town property. That's where we got involved. Yeah, this is in the weeds big.
Yeah, I know. I mean, and not to get, well, anyway, I won't get deeper into the weeds. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but that's actually a good
But
example.
whatever.
Should the Board of Selectmen have even weighed in on it because the trustees are in charge of that facility?
Yeah.
That's an interesting question. What do you guys think?
Well, it had to do with the grounds. It didn't have to do with the building.
It did have to do
Had
the
to do
grounds,
with the
but let's
gift
say, so
Ground.
Nicole,
Yes, I was gonna say
or
this, yes,
Aunt Susie died.
yeah.
And she wants to put a new skate park in front of Gates.
Right,
Does the school
We-
committee approve that?
no,
It's a
that's
facility,
town property.
town property.
I mean, it's kind of like we would be involved, but technically, we don't control the grounds of the schools.
That's an
We would
interesting,
need some kind of town approval on that, I would assume,
Yeah.
because, or
But
at
if-
least cooperation and collaboration.
yeah, well, it may have
Right.
been the board just said, what does the trustees say out of courtesy, you know?
But if you read 3.6B literally here,
Yeah,
it says the management of the town libraries and all property of the town relating thereto.
aha. So it
So-
didn't beat us.
So,
I mean, it depends, right? You can make an argument either way there, but it's ambiguous.
Okay, so that
Theoretically,
goes
someone
back to, we need a better definition of this charge.
Because theoretically, someone could give a gift to the
Yeah,
library.
that's a good point.
at the library.
so not to get too deep into the weeds, but so it is the case that, or try not to get too deep in the weeds. So the school committee, so according to state law, and I know this because I was surprised to find it out in Hanover, but it's true. According to state law, either the Board of Selectmen or the school committee, as the case may be, as appropriate, need to approve the acceptance of any donation or gift or grant. So,
Yes, we do that a lot.
so, so I don't think, so as much as we may want it to be in the Board of Trustees authority, I don't think it is, that's possible according to state law. But if the gift was instead to the library
Yeah,
foundation and not the town, well, okay, that's different, right? But if the gift was to the town and not the library foundation, that's pretty clear in state law for what it's worth. So,
mhm.
Oh, so if I'm the library director, I'd want all the money going to the foundation.
Yeah,
that's what I
Yeah.
would.
That's right.
It is now.
I learned something.
there you go.
And I guess you could say if the library foundation is giving gifts, those are supposed to be approved by the Board of Selectmen, but
The Board of Selectmen would accept that donation.
yeah, right.
Yeah, the trustees don't normally, no, that's not true. They do accept home donations.
They should-
Actually, they don't have to approve it, though. It just comes in and Jesse puts it in a gift account.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. Figure that one out, Lincoln. Why do some people why do we have to accept some donations and some just?
I'm afraid the answer is you're supposed to accept all of them, but the question is, how much of a big deal.
Practicality.
But I'm
Right.
afraid the answer is, according to state law, you're supposed to accept all of them.
Yeah,
Okay, good to know.
Then why do they put that approval in? That's just strange. I get it. I understand.
All right, so what do the other towns say?
Trustees,
good question.
I don't know if, let's see. Long Meadow does not have library trustees in elected office.
Nor does Norwell.
I don't think Scituate, Swampscott does either.
What's wrong with those towns?
They don't try to manage for everything.
I think
Yeah.
they probably have appointed committees.
Could be,
Yeah, they could. Okay. All right,
conservation.
have we exhausted our conversation about library trustees?
Swampscott, instead of 6 members, only has 3
Of what?
on the library committee. Library trustees. They have 3.
We could have 7 and then it would be odd.
Yeah, we lost Lincoln. Okay. It
Well,
is,
and to Lincoln's point, they just reference the Mass General laws.
okay.
So one more thing with powers and duties here, there's no, cross-reference to or is otherwise provided in the charter bylaws pursuant to Massachusetts general laws. Should that be there?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Mhm.
Same as the same language as the others,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
MGL.
And who appoints the head librarian?
It's a town appointment. Actually, Mara, do you remember why do I think that the trustees interviewed?
Trustees interview,
Yeah,
but I don't know if it has to be approved by the Board of Selectmen. I don't know that.
I don't know. It's not approved by the Board of Selectmen, but I think that it's recommended to the town administrator, but the town administrator has the hiring authority.
Okay, that's
Isn't that the same with superintendent? You guys, do you have-
Superintendent, we have all of the hiring authority on, but then anything below superintendent, he's in charge of, he's kind of like the CEO of this company, so he
the
hires.
town administrator is the other side of the equation.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
like-
So that's the only position we have the authority over at all, really. It is written in some of the, I don't know if it's mass law, but we do have a position on a hiring committee for other positions, like
Principals.
director of special education or something. Like we'll have, a seat on the hiring committee, but superintendent's the only position we have hiring duties on.
Yeah, so I wonder if this is just a policy. It's not, definitely, I don't think it's in here anywhere. So major department heads.
Actually, I think we have director of business and finance as well, but Peter, the way it's written, we have authority over some piece of the hiring process of that, but we chose to open it up to a larger committee because it just made more sense to be transparent and inclusive. So there are a couple things that we can sort of skew in a smaller committee or subcommittee, but we choose to make more complex.
Do the charter, I mean,
Well, apparently, according to section 2 of chapter 30A of the general laws of the Commonwealth, the Board of Trustees shall serve as a screening committee.
Oh, that makes
Or-
sense. I think that was the practice.
for what?
Green.
The head librarian, sorry. I would think they would have something similar for school, right?
Yep, we had a screening committee for, we had a hiring / screening subcommittee for superintendent. There was probably like 20 people on it. That committee interviews, 8 candidates and narrows it to 3 is usually the recommendation. And then the school committee interviews those 3 and makes the final decision with the 2/3 vote. I looked up the removal. It's also 2/3. So
Okay.
Thank you.
knowing that that's not ever as easy as the conversations that take place around removal are so complicated and involve many more layers than just the 5 of elected school committee members. You would hope if the process is going correctly. Takes a long time to get to that point. You would hope.
Okay, totally lost what we're talking about. So we got added the library trustees, cross references, and then Andy asked about who hires the library director, and then we just veered off into hiring authority. Is hiring authority mentioned in any other documents? Where is that? Or should we just put that as a thing we should think about?
In terms of the library trustee stuff?
No, in general, sorry.
In general, hiring authority.
Andy, what did you say?
I was thinking I'd just put on a list for stuff to follow up on.
Okay, follow up.
That'd be my recommendation.
And that's generally, I mean, we're gonna get there in 4.2, right? We're
Okay,
about the town administrators. Hiring authority.
okay.
And what has to be sent to this select board, et cetera.
Right.
BOS.
If you're looking at school committee, technically we only have two responsibilities. One is managing the budget and the second is hiring the superintendent. Those are our lanes technically, even though.
Why are you so busy?
I know. You think it seems very straightforward.
Okay, well, it's 7:05 and we have 1, 2, 3 different positions. I think should we just plow through the town clerk, assessors and authority?
Yeah, hopefully there won't be so much discussion.
Okay, so 3.7 is our town clerk section. She is an elected that person, he or she is an elected position for 3 years. Anyone have any questions about that or concerns?
No, but everything she does is governed by the state.
Yeah, it's all MGL.
Yeah.
Duties and powers has all of that language. Any changes there?
No, but is the town clerk nominated and elected by the voters or just elected?
Elected. It's an elected position, so somebody chooses to run for it.
Right, yeah, so in term of office, says there'll be a town clerk nominated and
Oh,
elected.
that's a good point. What's the language on the?
Yeah, you're right. It should just say elected.
Well, they do say that in Board of Trustees, nominated and elected.
But they nominate themselves.
Oh, yeah, but technically you're nominated with 100 signatures.
Got it.
Oh. Right.
So are we okay with leaving that in there?
Yep, yeah, that clears it up. I didn't see it in the other one.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay. Then powers and duties, we talked about that. Any other comments about our intrepid town clerk? She deserves a raise. Okay. 3.8 is Board of Assessors. That is a 3-member nominated and elected. And then the duties, same language. There's nothing unique there. Any other comments or changes about assessors? Okay. Housing Authority. Marla, did you ever serve on that?
Nope.
Huh. I thought you did. 5 members, 5-year terms, overlapping. 4 are nominated and the 5th is a resident of the town appointed under provision 5, chapter general laws. Huh, never noticed that. I wonder if is that Mass General? It must be Mass General law.
Yeah, there's this thing in there about how one is appointed by the governor.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's odd.
Does that
And then
mean
they,
members have any
it's
different
different, like-
duties or responsibilities?
sorry?
Does that other member have any different duties or responsibilities than the other 4?
I think they're just a member like any other.
Yeah.
It's odd though.
Government appointee?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the funding comes from the state. That's probably why, right?
Well, it's the same thing with the powers and duties, right? It's written very differently in terms of the
Yeah.
language versus all the others.
Right.
I'm going to say that. They have duties and powers housing authorities may have under the Constitution and general laws. And it doesn't say anything about town bylaws or superseding, which I thought if you wrote something in your town bylaws, it superseded Mass General law.
To bring up something a little bit delicate, which is that I don't know if this is still the case. I know it was the case for a while that the members of the housing authority, I think were getting paid something, and maybe at one point something somewhat significant, or more significant than any other elected official, but by the ex-town clerk. Obviously, it was a full-time position, and then I know they were getting like health insurance. I don't know.
I think that's all true.
I think, is that all still true? I
I
don't know.
think it's all still true.
And it's a little bizarre, and maybe it's not within our zone of
They all
responsibility.
get paid? They all get paid, not just the appointed one?
I don't know. It's like the best held secret ever. Karen, do you know the answer to that?
No, but I think it's something that we should look into what the origin of that is.
Yeah.
Is it in maybe it's in Mass General Law that those who serve on this board get these,
Yeah.
so check.
I mean, I don't know if we want to go there or not, but it's just, I don't know if it's in our authority, but maybe it's discussed, because I'm not sure what other, because they're independent, I'm not really sure what other entity would ever discuss it. Do you know what I mean?
If they're so independent, why are they even referenced?
Well, that's a whole other, you're right.
I mean, should they even be in there?
Well, they're voted. We vote them so that they're in the charter because it's part of what we do, but
Are we required to have a housing authority? Yeah, I think we are.
You're not required to have a housing authority.
We're not.
Some towns do not.
I would say Swampscott doesn't have a,
I don't see it in Norwell.
I don't see it for Swampscott either.
Hanover does not have a housing authority.
so how do they manage their housing, their senior housing or low-income housing
There's no housing owned by the town. So
in
there's,
Hanover?
correct. I'm not saying that's a good thing. It's a bad thing, actually, but it's the case.
We
So,
have a lot.
that's right. Yeah, that's right. So,
I take it back. Swampscott does have it.
Yeah. Long Meadow does, and their powers and duties have all the language. It says housing shall have powers and duties under the Constitution and general laws and such powers that may be authorized by charter, bylaw, or other town voting. So they have the full language that the other committees have.
So-
In the Long Meadow, this is the Long Meadow one.
And I think that language makes sense to include in all of these, right? Because even though it's powers and duties that could be granted by these other places, you can also limit powers and duties
Yes.
in other ones. So I mean, even if it's never referenced in the bylaws, it could be later on. So I think it makes sense to include in all of these things.
I 100% agree.
and it could be something as simple as, because every other elected official who receives a salary state law says that, like, if there is a salary, it has to be voted by town meeting every year.
Right, it's per appointment.
And I never really
Yeah.
understood how, if indeed they're being paid now, how that happens without the approval of town meeting. But anyway.
Yeah, because what's the housing authority has its own separate thing, right? Financially, they have.
Yeah, so they have their own, they have their own accounts, and nobody's really.
Who oversees? Let's put that as a question. Who oversees finances?
Right. I'm afraid the answer may be no one but them.
Look at us kicking butt, huh?
I know. Like I said, it's a little delicate. If you don't want to go there, I'm fine. It's a little.
Hey, that's our job. I have no problem with.
Yeah.
In addition to the finances, I
Yeah.
would like to know who oversees the housing authority. Period.
Wasn't that this body?
Well, I guess the voters do because they can vote them in or out, but
What if they effectively operate in secret, right? How does a voter make any kind of informed?
How do you determine?
and
Well, here's the other question. Is this is one of the few bodies that has a 5-year term.
A long time.
It's a long time.
but they also set policy for all those housing.
Yep.
And allow people in and out and make rules that can either hurt people or not hurt needy people. So I'd
But-
like to know who has authority over them.
Norwell's is written similarly to ours. 5 members, 4 elected for 3-year overlapping terms, and 1 appointed under the general laws.
How long are their terms?
Same.
5 members, 4 elected for 3 years overlapping terms,
So
and
they have-
1 appointed under general laws.
They're 3 years.
But yes, 3 years.
Let's see.
So does the housing authority, they can't approve the building of a project or do that?
They're doing one right now.
Right, but they had to get the funding from,
Right.
State.
If they had the financing, they could.
Is it, I mean, this was it. Does
No,
it
I mean-
have any, what shall we say, blocking rights on what the housing authority does? So they literally could throw up a building next door to your house and impact your property value, and you as a town resident have no say in that.
Oh, well, that is CPC funds too, because we've been plowing money into their CPC budget for years and years. Because they get 10% of all the CPC funds, and they have been just saving them over the years. And this is the first project that has come about for them to spend their money on for affordable housing.
Yeah, the housing authority has sites that they control around town.
That
I'm not
they
sure
own,
that-
not the town, right?
Pardon me?
It's always been explained to me that they own, not the town, separate.
Correct, 100%.
And frankly, I never even really understood how the housing authority was a separate like tax entity, but anyway, that's why
Yeah, I'm not sure how that works either.
I never really understood that, but
So in Long Meadow, they have terms of 5 years as well. Okay, we have a lot of questions then apparently about the housing authority, don't we? Okay, so that's homework. Anything else about them that we haven't covered? Okay, so we've come to the conclusion of Article 3. Well done, team. And then the only thing I would add, and this was before we learned so much about the bylaws, I was wondering if there were any other boards and committees that should be elevated to the charter as opposed to being covered in the bylaws. And I think we talked at another meeting earlier that the problem with doing that is it requires an act of the legislature to change it. So like we could put charter review committee in the, hello, charter review into the charter. But then what if we said, yeah, we never need to have another charter review? Why is it there? So I put that out there for you guys to think about. If you think something that is in the bylaws needs to be elevated, we consider that. Maybe we'll put that as homework for next week or next meeting. Not saying we're meeting next week. Did anyone have anything else in that section that they thought needed to be talked about?
I just was confused because I keep looking at the town bylaws and they're only, all of the people we've just talked about are just listed with nothing, with no governance, no rules.
For the committees?
I'm not, maybe it's somewhere that I'm not looking, but I see them listed, but I don't see any. So I guess they have to follow the charter, but so that's why I think the charter is really important because they're not, their responsibilities are not included in the bylaws.
So are you saying any board or committee appointed should have consistent authorities or?
No, I just was interested that it's not, that the elected town officials' jobs, rights and responsibilities are not included in the bylaws. They're just
The
not-
elected officials are
the
responsible.
elected officials. So I think that it's really important that we make sure that the charter does a good job of laying out what their responsibilities are.
it's a really good point.
Okay. Okay, yeah, kind of Andy's point about the jellyfishness of the library trustees. Okay. Okay, good point.
I found Norwell's too. The way the page was cut off weird. It like started the heading and then you had to flip the page and I missed it at the top. But they also have 6 elected. So they have that even number on the library trustees as well. So it's not just us.
It's a
But I
library.
wonder what the history of it is.
Maybe it was a thing.
I'm guessing somebody looked at the MBLC website a million times. They just do what they just said there.
Right.
Okay, cool. All right. The only other note I had for this section, and I think Andy, maybe you brought this up, and I don't remember why I wrote this, but posted on town website. I think that was to something about transparency, about, I don't even know why I wrote this down. Boards and committees. I don't know why I wrote that down, but we'll remember that. Any other comments on Article 3? Look at us. Okay. So the next important thing is to figure out when we want to start Article 4. So we've been meeting every 2 weeks. Is that still desirable?
Yeah, that works.
Okay, which would bring us to the 9th.
This
And
town meeting? Town meeting's not the 9th, right?
no, it's the 16th. So
Okay.
it's the following week. Is the 9th agreeable to the committee? Okay, 6 o'clock work for everyone? Who's in charge of reminding Becky?
You.
Yeah, I found the reason why we have 6 library trustees.
Ooh, tell us.
This is deep in the weeds here. MGL Chapter 78, Section 10.
Huh.
You have any town that has a free public library, shall have provisions for the election of its trustees or for its care and management, etc., shall elect by ballot at a meeting a board of trustees consisting of any number of persons, male or
Even.
female, divisible by 3.
Aha.
Oh, there you go.
So we could have 9, we could have 3.
Wow.
For some reason, we chose 6.
Could have 18.
We could have 8.
According to law.
Said the school committee.
We could have 21. Anyway, so
Wow.
So, well, thank you for that.
no, sorry to bore everybody with that.
No.
We
No,
won't make
It's
seven.
a good, gives you a reason. Reasoning is always,
That's
to
right.
have an answer to a question is wonderful.
I
That's
still
direct.
don't think 6 makes sense, but that's
Who thought that was a good idea?
Yeah, that's
All right, we're all going to join the state review of the Mass General Law
right.
At
appointed.
least if you had 3, that would be a 2-to-1,
Yeah, that's
you wouldn't-
weird.
Yeah.
I don't know. 21. Could have 21 at least. You wouldn't get an even one.
So for the agenda, if I'm going to post it again,
Yes.
are we doing 4, Article 4? Do we want to go, that's 4 is the town administrator. Do we want to say, just to protect ourselves, 5 as well or not?
Yeah, that's fine. And would you add approve the minutes?
Yes,
for
I've done that
the last 2. Okay, cool.
for today and last time.
Correct.
Okay, yep.
And I will make sure that the recordings are sent to the recording world. And you can get your cocoa and enjoy them at your leisure. Good. All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
All right. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Hi.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody. We will,
Thank you.
I did get a direction from town administrator not to take any of his authority away, he said. I said
Careful what you
that-
wish for.
I said he was in trouble and we were going to talk about him all night long. So,
Next time.
That's
there you go. All right. We'll see you guys in 2
Bye.
weeks. Vote early. Bye.
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 Bye.